lazy day divine nugget. This is going to be a short one, but I think one of incredible value. I also want to acknowledge that for some of you, this might be ahead on your journey. This might be the start of you learning this lesson on your journey, or you might already be there and it's just kind of a confirmation that you got this and you're doing the right thing already. And what it is that you get to a certain point where you go through the healing journey and you go through so many spiral cycles of releasing control over how you act, what you do, or how other people are acting. You learn patience and temperance and understanding, compassion, unconditional love, all these things. And it's funny because usually we are triggered to learn that by someone or something in our lives that we cannot control. And the funny thing is once you get to a certain point, especially when you've gone through enough spiral cycles of learning to stand in your power and embrace your power, you actually realize you could control it. You could. The but the best two examples I think I can give are my kids and my DM. Like, I mean, the funny thing is like so many people unfortunately pride themselves, and I used to be among them. I was never abusive, but I was definitely authoritarian. It was all about control. Look how well I can control them, and I got that from society and my family and lots of stuff like that. But I realized that even though I can control my kids like that, I don't want to. I don't want them to grow up feeling like that's what life has to be like. I want them to feel independent and like they can trust themselves and they know when things are safe and when they're not. I want them to feel like sovereign beings so that they can learn all new things, make new messes, or if they go through similar messes to what I and my DM have done, their dad, then they can do it a whole new way. They can mess it up their own way. And I want them to feel like making messes isn't always bad, that they can change their minds whenever they want to, and that I'm always going to be there no matter what goes on. And kind of the same thing with my DM. It's funny because I went from a space of like, I can control it to I don't like I can't control this, so I need to release control to recognizing that actually, and it's not because like I can like control free will, but he has and would have just given me control, even though it was in sort of a counterintuitive way. It was there, and I actually came to realize through several spiral cycles and other people who know him that he's quite frustrated that I've not done what I could to actually control him and end the situationship and do all sorts of things, pursue, be dramatic, do all that stuff. And it's something that I've tried to say to him many times is like, I don't want to be that kind of person. I'm not that kind of person. And what's funny is when you get to the healing point where you realize you actually did have the power and authority, do have the power and authority to control a lot of people in a lot of situations. You could influence them in so many different ways. You could insert yourself and interfere and create drama or just be overly loving and pull them in, but do you really want to? That's what this nugget is about. Is like I know a lot of us, especially early on in the journey, it's not so much about it like a malicious need to want to control what somebody else does. It's simply a codependent thing about like if we don't control this situation, it feels like everything will fall apart, or it challenges our identity about who we are and who we've been, and that really, that makes an even bigger difference the longer you've been in said situation. It could be a long-term job, a long-term family entanglement, karmic situationships, unions, separations, you name it. Um, and when it comes to challenging our identities and hitting that identity crisis, we often try to control others around us so we don't lose what we perceive to be as us. the identity, which isn't us. We're actually the being that observes the identity that we think we have, and we can change it and feel good about it anytime we want. The hard part is the layers of conditioning and trauma and worrying about what other people think. And so then you get to a point to where you realize you absolutely could control things. You could do, if nothing else, you could do a whole lot of damage along the way, even if you couldn't control it. But do you really want to? And the bigger question is like, I mean, especially when it comes to relationships, let's say you could just snap your fingers and the other person would do exactly what you want. They would call you, they would text you, they would apologize, they'd grovel if you want them to, do acrobatics and like do, I don't know, circus acts with fire twirling around. Like, let's say you could make them do anything that you wanted. Is it really what you want? Do you really just want somebody that just does everything that you say? Do you really want somebody that never provides any contrast, that is just a complete yes man or yes woman? Is that really what you want? And do you really want to be that sort of like ringmaster, circus master, mistress, to where you're constantly having to tell everybody what to do all the time? Because that's what you get when you manifest stuff like that is, yeah, you could have somebody, there's plenty of people in the world who will gladly be in relationship with you and just do everything you say, but 9 times out of 10 they also don't ever want to make any decisions, so that means you will be the only one making any decisions. And usually the way it works is that if you have somebody that you're with and they're just doing everything that you're saying, it's likely that they don't really like doing any of it, and they're very codependent and are placating, unless you've gotten into a very explicitly detailed consensual arrangement that's kink based. And even then, there's still plenty of red flags that pop up that still show you whether or not they're enjoying it or placating. And as humans, we're fluid. We're not always going to be in one state or another, and a healthy relationship can adapt to that with and without kinky arrangements. And if that's not happening, you don't really have what you think you have. And so, like, the real lesson about releasing control isn't the whole don't worry about the things you can't control. The real lesson is you can control a lot of things. Do you really want to? Do you want that responsibility? Do you want that kind of life? Because I can tell you, as a Capricorn, it's not always fun to be in charge. It's not always fun to be right. In fact, there are more times when it's not fun, and when being right sucks. But once you start to release control and you realize this other great thing, that it is so much more fun to not know, to let spirit have control, to let other people do what they will do. And when you do that, and you do that in faith rather than in, they're going to do whatever they're going to do anyways, when you do it in faith and you know that they're going to do wonderfully no matter how it plays out, and you're good with any outcome, and you know you're going to feel great no matter what part in the story you get or you write or that they play in yours, then everything is cake. It's the icing on the cake. It's the whipped cream. It's the cherry on top of the sundae with sprinkles. And because you didn't control any of it, because you didn't interfere or try to influence it or do any of that, you know that it's all wanted on all sides. And that's so much juicier and more delicious than forcing anything. So really, when it comes to control, whether releasing it or having it or any of that, the real question is, if you could do that, is that really what you'd want? Something to think about.